Influencing popular culture, politics, and everything in between. The local station takes you ringside as we discuss the crazy world that is professional wrestling. This is Going Ringside with the local station.
Hello there, and thank you for joining us for the special on-location episode of Going Ringside. Special episode because we're talking to arguably the greatest color commentator in the history of this industry. That would be Jerry the King Lawler. The King has been an iconic figure through the decades on American television. Everyone knows who he is. He's been around so long, he has done it so long. So let's start at the beginning, where Jerry really became known as kind of the King of Memphis, running his regional territory there in the 1980s. I think maybe as far back as the 70s, definitely the 80s, when Vince McMahon is coming in and destroying all the territories, but his territory was very strong. He was up there when you had guys like Ric Flair running the territories. Lawler was the king in Memphis. And by saying king, I mean he was just kind of the top guy, but he was also figuratively the king. That's his character that he had. Jerry Lawler really became a national figure on the David Letterman show in the early 1980s. If you remember the iconic thing with Andy Kaufman on David Letterman with a neck brace when Andy Kaufman from Taxi, the famous comedian, one of the greatest comedians ever, tries out wrestling in Lawler's territory, and they go on and they never let anyone know this is a pre-scripted thing. I don't know if Letterman knew. I honestly don't know. And they go on and they start a fight on the David Letterman show. Probably for David Letterman's first 15 years of his talk show, maybe the most famous clip on a David Letterman show ever. And David Letterman's arguably the greatest talk show host in American history, him and Carson. Lawler goes on with Andy Kaufman and beats him up, and it is a huge, controversial. In the early 1980s, fans all believed it was real. They didn't know what to make of this. There was no internet, there was no social media. You just had this happen on a major NBC show. Jerry Lawler's in the middle of it. This is before he goes national, the WWF. This is when he's just a regional, territorial wrestling guy. He's there in the national spotlight on NBC, one of the biggest shows in the world. Jerry Lawler, as a regional wrestling promoter, is at the center of it. It cannot be underscored how important he was. Then, of course, Lawler eventually, as the territories are folding and he still has a relationship with Vince McMahon with his still regional territory, which is still surviving, McMahon hires him to come in and be a heel. He comes in, he feuds with the likes of Bret Hart and does a lot of other things. He was just so good. Anytime they would have a celebrity come into wrestling, they'd put him with Lawler because Lawler was so good at it. He could make it believable, he could sell, he could play the heel. But what Jerry Lawler eventually became most known for is when WWF made the brilliant business move to have him and good old JR, Jim Ross, become the announced duo for Monday Night Raw. The greatest broadcasting duo of all time. There's the arguments, is it Heenan or Gorilla, or is it, JR and King? No one really knows, but King's arguably at the top. Him or Heenan, you can't really tell who's better. But JR did it for so long. That's the difference. Not JR, excuse me. Lawler did it so long. That's the difference. So Lawler continues during their groundbreaking days when Austin and The Rock, Trish Stratus, and all the other stars are going to the stratosphere. Lawler is there as the color commentator right alongside his close friend Jim Ross. Fans love them. Fans believe them. Even when Vince McMahon starts his own football league in the early 2000s, I think it was, the XFL, the first iteration, they try out Lawler and Jim Ross as the broadcasting duo. Didn't necessarily work out, but it shows you how famous they were, how iconic they were, because they made the business decision to try and put Lawler in that football announce booth because he was so well known with the American public. Jerry has remained a figure with WWE. He eventually, his broadcast deal finally came to a conclusion in recent months with WWE. I think he still has a Legends deal. But he's just been a fixture of American life for 40 years. There are a few people in the world who are part of the American, social media world For 4 decades, Jerry Lawler has been. Jerry sadly is starting to run into some health issues, as comes with age, as has his broadcast partner we've had on the show, Jim Ross. Jim's been having health struggles. Jerry's having health struggles. I met up with Jerry at River City Wrestling Con here in Northeast Florida, where we're at, and Jerry was there. It was very nice, still in his king garb, happy to talk to us. And we talked a lot. We talked a little about his health, where he's at right now, how things are going in life, and an interesting thing I never knew about Trish Stratus. He mentioned Trish Stratus because I asked him about that, because he would always put Trish Stratus over. He kind of had that character of the extra hormonal announcer who would always love the female wrestlers, and he would always talk about Trish. He said something very interesting you want to hear in this interview, which I didn't really know. But Jerry, a lot more calmer than I think he was in his younger years, still dealing with health issues, but still getting around, going to the conventions, and still the iconic figure that fans grew up with if they grew up in the 80s, the 90s, or the 2000s. Jerry Lawler still around and still going strong, but dealing with some health setbacks, so we talk about that. But let's get to it. Here is our interview with probably the GOAT of color commentators in pro wrestling, Jerry the King Lawler. Well, we are here with the icon himself, Jerry the King Lawler. Jerry, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, doing great. Looking around, there's this big crowd, and it's awesome to see all these people here.
How is life going for you? What's going on with you? Doing a lot of conventions?
Doing a lot of conventions. I'm sort of hobbling around right now. I just had a knee replacement, my right knee, and but it's doing good. But it's a little bit hobbling here and there.
How has life been? Because you say you've been hobbling. I know you've dealt with some health things, but you seem to be doing pretty well right now.
Well, I seem to be doing pretty well. People just see me like this, but at home I live by myself, and it's a little tough there right now. But it seemed to get better.
How is I always wondered, how did Vince bring you in? You were the face of the Tennessee territory all those years, and then all of a sudden life changed for you in the mid-1990s. How did that happen?
Well, it happened by he agreed to bring me into WWE and still let me work in USWA. As a matter of fact, the first time Vince ever became a heel, he came down to Memphis and worked against me. And nobody else saw it.
Did you train Vince McMahon to be a heel?
Sort of. He learned a little bit from me there, yeah.
So your character changed to more of the king, the heel commentator, to the greatest color commentator of all time. Did you know that would happen when you were still in Tennessee?
Of course. No, I didn't know that. I get still. This has been since 1992 that I've been that. So I just go. I did it every day, every week, and it's just something that I was doing. I wasn't thinking about it's making me the greatest or anything like that. I was just doing it on a daily basis because I was one to wrestle more than I wanted to commentate. So it just happened the way it did, you know.
Did your contract recently end with WWE?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
The commentating contract.
Gotcha.
I had 2 strokes about 7 months ago, and so they started. It's not good for commentating, right?
Yeah.
But I'm still under contract with them. I don't know, just one of the greatest, and all of those things. You know.
And JR couldn't be here, unfortunately, but you still keep in touch with JR a lot?
I do. JR's, I try to stay in touch with him as much as I can. I have not talked to him since I've been down here to this day, but I talked to him last week, and at that time he was kind of, coming to this convention. And then, I don't know, I think he's back in the hospital. I'm going to check today when I get out.
What do you think about what wrestling's going on? WWE merged with the UFC. It's all kind of a different ballgame today.
Yeah, it is a little different. It's so much on at TV right now. It's on almost matches every day of the week. So when I'm not working on it right now, I'm not watching it that much. So I understand there's a lot of stuff going on there.
Do you miss it?
Do I miss it?
Do you miss the traveling, the week to week, or is that easy to be away from?
It's hard to say. I said it's easy to be around because of my health, not having to travel very much. But now I'm back with my knee replaced. I'm traveling more, and so my book is like I'm doing something every weekend now. So.
And I see a lot of your contemporaries here, like everyone from Trish to Scott Steiner to Duggan. They're all here today. Like particularly Trish, you really kind of had that bond between commentator and performer all those years.
Well, you know what? It's good to think that, and it's good to hear you say that. But I really had no relationship with her. I mean, with just what you saw on TV was just what was going on.
Really?
And was not around there that much. But I thought the world of her, and a couple of times when she just started, she rode with me on a couple trips, and she was fun to be around, and she was but she just went on to be big.
Yeah. Well, Jerry the King, the legend, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
So it was so exciting. I was so happy that Jerry could sit down with us. I want to kind of change direction really quickly. Bring in one of our Going Ringside producers, Rory Thompson, to discuss Jerry's legacy and really greatest announcers of all time. And Rory, I brought you in because you're the younger generation for me. I love Lawler and Jim Ross in the Attitude Era. You like a lot of the more current announcers. So I want to kind of have this conversation. You know, it's widely regarded by many fans that Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler are the greatest broadcast duo of all time. A lot of people point before that and Bobby Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon, but I want to talk more recent with you, Rory, because that's more your generation. What do you think about Jerry Lawler as far as, you know, among the greatest announcers of all time? Do you think any of the current guys are really making headway in that discussion? Because Jerry and JR were, you know, such an iconic duo.
Well, I kind of grew up in the end of their careers, or at least the end of their tenure with WWE. So for me, I grew up with JR and, you know, the King. So like, I definitely have a lot of respect for them, and I definitely think that them together is just magic. And that's a lot of my, you know, early memories with wrestling. I would definitely say that Michael Cole is like one of the few wrestling announcers that is kind of in that conversation, because Michael kind of started, you know, he started about, I don't want to say 25 years, but it's been, you know, kind of that time range. And for me growing up, I remember a lot of Michael Cole.
I want to get your opinion on the Cole question, because I've thought about this for years. So when I think of old school announcers, like let's just do Jim Ross and Lawler. Lawler's the king. Jim's got the cowboy hat, and, you know, he's kind of got a gimmick. Whereas Mike Cole just came off, to me, it's just an announcer. He's an announcer named Michael Cole. Like the other guys seem to kind of almost have wrestling gimmick. You know what I mean? I mean, Lawler, in fact, did. What do you think? Do you think that even though Michael, you know, do you think he still kind of developed a wrestling persona over these years? Or does he just seem like an announcer guy to you? I always wondered that.
I think he's definitely kind of made a character for himself, because I remember I don't remember what year it was, but it was like the 2010s when they had like the Raw general manager as a laptop, and Michael was the guy who kind of talked to the crowd. And so I think that was a good moment for his character. You know, back in his early days, he was kind of more of a heel, and he's kind of developed more as a face, you know, a face announcer. And I feel like he's kind of not, I don't want to say like the grandfather of WWE, but he's kind of like that uncle that I feel that a lot of wrestlers, you know, kind of have relationships with. You know, he always has feuds with Bailey, and, you know, I think his relationship with the wrestlers is so important because he talks to them. He doesn't just announce, you know, he just doesn't he doesn't do like play by play. He's also like, hey, you're doing this, and he's talking to the wrestlers as they're coming towards the announcers, and it's just kind of cool because I think that was so important when Cody Rhodes won the WWE Championship finally. Like you could hear it in his voice. You saw him crying, and I think his persona has just kind of become this, not grandfather, but maybe like a godfather of kind of the industry. So many people respect him, and he's just to me, he seems like a genuine cool guy.
I want to get your opinion on Lawler with respect to one thing outside of announcing that he was always known for is anytime they'd like have a celebrity come in who's out of wrestling, they'd put Jerry with them a lot. What do you think it says that, your ability to work as a performer when you get these mega stars, like I remember William Shatner, and there have been others, and they put Lawler to get in the ring, mouth off to them, have the heel interaction. Do you think that's something that WWE is only going to put you in if they really trust you because they want to make the celebrity look good? Because celebrities, they're kind of out of their element. You need a pro who can walk them through that.
I believe that they definitely feel that, when Lawler came and these celebrities were here, I felt like they felt that he was somebody who could feed off of them and kind of propel them. Because right now they kind of just have Michael Cole. They have Pat McAfee, but it's kind of like Pat McAfee's a character in himself. So I think that is so important to have somebody who's kind of like that, the peanut butter to your jelly. So I think that, when they did bring in these guests and Lawler was able to say, hey, I can easily mesh with them and kind of keep the crowd into it. Because I think that's always important with a lot of these celebrities. Some celebrities just don't have it to, kind of command a crowd. A lot of times people are like, who are these people? And I think that it's so important to have somebody like a Lawler, like a Michael Cole, to kind of just like balance it out and keep people into it.
So one other thing about Jerry Lawler is Lawler's always kind of been a heel. It makes me think of like a Ric Flair, always a heel. But the longer they've been around, they just kind of just become beloved. Like do fans just eventually stop booing you? They just kind of just love you as a character they grew up on?
I would say so. I think that's, like I said, with Michael Cole, Michael Cole has a history of being a heel announcer. And I think over time, it just kind of is like people respect him. People really like him. I think that was one of the reasons why when there was I forgot who recently left from the announcers table, but when they had that that empty space, they had Michael Cole doing both shows and the PLEs. And it just shows that like they trust him and people really want him on television. And so I think it takes a lot of time for the WWE or any wrestling company universe to kind of fall in love with somebody. And I think that just shows that, Lawler, JR, Michael Cole, anybody else you want to name have just become so beloved by fans because people respect them. It's not just the fans, but it's also the wrestlers. It's also the company. And I think that's so important to keeping wrestling alive for, generations to come.
Well, Rory Thompson, our producer here at Going Ringside, thanks for joining us. We're going to go back to me in the field as we close the show out. Thanks, Rory.
No problem.
So I want to thank King for taking the time to sit and talk with us. So glad we could catch up. He was not happy. Jim Ross was supposed to be at the event with him. JR and he both ran into some health issues right at the same time. Lawler was able to make it. JR was still recovering at the time, but we desperately wanted to have Lawler on to talk with him. We would love to talk to JR. Maybe we will down the road, but we were so glad to talk to Jerry the King Lawler, the guy known on David Letterman in the 80s, the guy on top as your top announcer in the 90s, 2000s, 2010s. He's just been a fixture for so long, and we're so happy to have him here on the show. So thank you for joining us in this episode of Going Ringside. We'll definitely see you back here next week.
This has been Going Ringside with The Local Station, brought to you every Wednesday on your favorite podcast player, on News4Jax Plus, as well as the News4Jax YouTube channel.